Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Garsten, and welcome to the Tales from the Beat 2025 recap. In 3 seasons and 131 episodes or so, we've stayed true to our mission of looking at news and PR from both sides of the scrimmage line. So, buckle in for highlights from our 2025 Tales from the Beat interviews, and a little bit of my monologues, looking at everything from auto shows to EV Story to one agency's audacious money back guarantee to an AI startup. One of its founders claims can help prevent grievous editorial errors. We spoke about building relationships with reporters, and I include a clip from my monologue on editorial string theory, featuring actual pieces of string. Let's kick it off with TopSpeed.com editor Craig Cole in episode 107, talking about reporters who complain auto shows have lost their glitz and purpose.
I mean, what do you think, Craig? Is that too much whining from just, crusty old automotive journalists that want things the way they were?
I do think it's too much complaining because ultimately, what are you there for? You're there to cover the cars. And for me personally, I would rather have cars on carpet,
Yeah.
no fancy displays, because it's logistically just easier to navigate the show floor. You're not tripping over. Automakers love to put little elevation changes in at their booths.
Yeah.
And if you're not paying attention or you're carrying camera equipment, you're always tripping on that.
Right.
There are little glass dividers they like to put up too between the booths. And it's just having an open field of cars can be a lot easier to cover.
Well, Dan Roth has been around the block both as an auto journalist and a PR guy. And in episode 108, we talk about lots of issues, including how the electric vehicle story has been reported.
They seem less than confident about, we built this product almost not because it's great and because it's fuel agnostic. We don't talk about that. We talk about only the climate side of it.
Right.
But the other side of it is it doesn't care what generates that, those sine waves that make the charger work.
Sure, right.
So you could charge it with a generator. You could charge it with a coal-fired power plant. You could charge it with a trash incinerator. You can charge it with solar panels, wind power. It doesn't care. As long as the electricity is doing that, you're filling the batteries.
Well, I got to know Brian Kramer when he was my PR contact at cargurus.com. He's moved on from there, and this year he began publishing a pretty cool weekly newsletter called This Week in PR Takes, which presents the week's highlights and PR commentary.
I think PR people have to have a little bit of a mindset refresh. It's not the reporter's job to respond to our pitches and emails. And I think there's a misconception that PR people deserved a response. And I think, if anything, we have to convey a compelling reason for someone to respond to us.
Greg Migliore is a longtime auto journalist who's currently editorial director at Vertical Scope. Among the many topics we discussed was kind of burnout on the import tariff story.
Yeah, it's really just been like a seesaw, boomerang, pick your cliche. I mean, we literally on the Auto Guide side, we would send out these newsletters with like the latest tariff news of the day, and the proof would come around, and then like 20 minutes later, I'd be like, hey, no, to my site coordinator, we got to rewrite that headline. The tariffs are off or they're back on, and it's pretty wacky. Ultimately, I do think it's bad for consumers. They're going to pay more. The car companies are going to probably have to pass some of this cost along to consumers. I think it's, kind of an outdated reactionary approach to the economy. So I think it's not going to be a really, I think, holistic way to try to make these things work going forward.
AI. It's taken over the world, right? But Elliot Katz, a founder of Mixes.ai, explained in episode 116 how the platform that includes human involvement to verify the accuracy of results could be a help to reporters using AI to conduct research.
They could be using Mixes, and they could have rules that are, brought out through Mixes that say, before you publish anything, you have to have your editor or a colleague or multiple colleagues press that verify button, meaning they've actually reviewed, they know that what the AI put out is real and not total slop, etc.
Well, I first met Randall McAdory back when I worked for one of a billion versions of Chrysler. I was in corporate PR and he was in marketing. Well, today, Randall posts an incisive commentary in the Taskmaster newsletter. In episode 117, Randall spoke about fairness of coverage of the EV story.
I think there's been a slant. I think there have been slants. I
Yeah.
think Detroit media has, in the last 10 years have kind of been this slanted
Right.
for, legacy automakers and what I'll call internal combustion engine coverage in terms of being, positive. And I think non-Detroit media has sort of, been slanted toward what I would call more positive coverage of EVs and Tesla and Musk. As far as China goes, though, I think the media in general has covered the threat. So I'll call it the threat from Chinese automakers fairly. And I think it's been fair, and I think it's opened the eyes. Obviously, the legacy, the automakers' eyes are open, but I think it's opened the eyes of the general reader about the Chinese automakers, the subsidies that that are behind a lot of the Chinese automakers, the prices that they can charge, and the significant growth the really significant growth that I think they're experiencing globally.
All right, now for one of my little monologues in episode 120 titled String Theory. I used a pretty low-budget prop to explain how reporters create stories from fragments of information. All right, big budget production here. Here's a literal piece of string. Okay, literal. There it is. Okay. Now let's say it represents an interview. Here's another one. Some quotes from a presentation, and I still got one more with some information from some infographics from another source, right? I got all these pieces of string from all sorts of places, but as you can see, each strand by itself, kind of wimpy, kind of weak, wouldn't nearly be strong enough to support an entire story. But stay with me here, when you find a common theme and a creative way to tie them together. Yes, I was a Boy Scout many, many, many years ago. Now we've got a pretty strong strand of content here, right? So remember the scandal of the CEO and the HR chief of an obscure company called Astronomy being caught canoodling on a kiss cam during a Coldplay concert? Well, in episode 122, Sam Locricchio, director of account services at the Detroit PR agency Near Perfect Media, weighs in on how the company used a humorous spot to cool the chatter while heating up its awareness. Yeah.
As a guy who tends to make an awful lot of jokes on occasion, and as a guy who has to do that sometimes on stage, you gotta watch, what you're saying. And it's not just the idea of a new PC environment. It's just you're the face of what that is that day. And for them to utilize the humor, they recognize the fact that it was so widespread. It was on everything. And you have to say, hey, as she did, people are now interested in what we do. We recognize that.
Right, yeah.
A little taken aback at, what are they? Are they going to tell me my horoscope? No, wrong word. No. So I think they handled it appropriately with humor, despite humor being a slippery slope.
Now, Julian Bond is a social media savant who's worked for many different companies. He's certainly a whiz at using all methods of boosting a company's social media visibility. And in episode 124, Julian spoke to me about dealing with AI search results.
I think a little bit of both. I think it's a little bit of I think there's kind of when it comes up, it's good to have that kind of backer of this is the source of truth for information. We know what's out there kind of thing. And so when people look for this kind of information that you as a company know isn't exactly true, what you try to do is you have to counter it in a weird way. Use a hashtag of the keyword that isn't quite with the content that you're producing per se, but it's related to it. So when people look it up, then you have that source of truth information of like, here it's right there. So you kind of have to play ball with AI in a sense, like it aids you, the creating content it was out there, but to your good point of like, if it's not great information that your company wants to do, they're like, okay, what the hey, what's going on? But I think that's where in the last year I've been working with teammates on my last team that, hey, let's kind of point them to that source of truth, but also we know what AI is saying. Let's kind of take that information, put it into our content a little bit, but also the baseline is the actual real information.
Yeah. Now, I didn't know Robyn Malone before one of her folks contacted me about having her on as a guest to discuss her own little bit of magic for building rapport with reporters as CEO of RJ Communications in episode 125.
So we have a process that we have trademarked called Finding Your Story Space. And the whole point of it is to think beyond. It's not white space, which is commercial and marketing and competitor based. It's not share a voice, which is media coverage and chatter. It's the next step. And that's what we do. So we work to find your story space, because story space is not just looking at how you're showing up in the market. It's how you're showing up in the conversation and where you can be and where you can show up and how you can show up in a way that's uniquely yours.
Well, I made another new friend during episode 126. She's Anna Tran. She's founder of Level Up with Anna PR. Now, Anna emailed me. She's anxious to discuss her method called purpose-driven PR and how she builds relationships with reporters through trust.
You mentioned a good point there, because you experience it of being pitched to all the time. And it's kind of like if somebody approaches you and it feels like, they want something out of you right away, like, hey, picture me, please, Ed. If you feel that, it doesn't, it's not off to a good start. So building trust is just making sure that you, first of all, ask the right questions to really understand, hey, Ed, where are you at as a journalist? Like, what type of stories are you looking for? And even if I'm a good fit, if it's a yes or a no, like, at least I got to know you. Get to know the person first before trying to gain something out of it.
Well, Kelly Law is simply just one of my favorite PR people. She's an account manager at PR firm The Brand Amp. Now, we worked together on a ton of stories about her client, Archer Aviation. Now, in episode 128, Kelly explained how she successfully connects with reporters.
When I'm reaching out to reporters, I'm truly being mindful of what they cover and not being a pesky PR person by spamming them with news that I know may not be worthy of coverage. If I have news that I think wouldn't be as huge of a deal to them, you mentioned it, but I frame it as that. I frame it as I'm keeping them in the loop. And then if I have news that I think would be a bigger deal to them, I'll then give them a call or I'll text them in order to get their thoughts as soon as I can, in case they'd like to plan around it or get interviews in advance. And building that trust and that relationship has really gone a long way. Now, if I have reporters at major national news outlets, they are inclined to pick up my phone call or respond to my text quickly, because they know Kelly wouldn't be bothering me on something that wouldn't be newsworthy to me. Like, if she has something that she's aware I would potentially want to cover, I'm going to take the time to listen to her, because I've built that trust in advance.
All right. Can a single news release trigger a news cycle? One day, Jennett contacted me about how she pulled off that trick and would love to discuss it on Tales from the Beat, which she did on episode 129.
But I saw something coming with some glimpses of people talking about data centers in space. Jeff Bezos said something at a conference, and then I told my company, this is going to be a thing. I see it happening. This is going to go viral. This is going to be a moment for us. So the company that we were partnering with called StarCloud. Give a shout out to Philip there. He's pretty good at social media. I'm sure he'll be enjoying this. But he and I went back and forth for just a couple of weeks on an MOU that we had already signed right before we went out of stealth. Rendezvous Robotics has only been out of stealth for 2.5 months now.
Oh, wow.
And so we we aligned, stars aligned, and we put out a release that I thought would be great. But I chose a particular journalist, which I know you and I will talk about it a little bit too, is how do you manage and why do you choose certain journalists? And this is a journalist I've been working with for years. And although I hadn't given him anything yet on my company, I'd given it to other people, this was the perfect one for him. And his name is Eric Berger. He wrote the book Lift Off and Lift Off 2. And as soon as he put the article out, Elon Musk responded to it.
Wow.
And said, I'm going to do, yes, this makes a lot of sense, validating all of our efforts that this is a thing. And then said, and by the way, SpaceX will be doing this with Starlink. And so it's a completely different play than what we're doing. So it's complementary. It's not something that would be, in any kind of competition for us. So we watched this go viral to then see that Google comes out and says, guess what? We're going to do data safe bases in space. And then you've got, Amazon coming out, and you had this moment. Sam Altman comes on. We're going to, OpenAI is doing databases in space. This is still a news cycle that's going, and it's been 3 weeks now that we put out this release.
In another one of my little monologues titled Competitive Paranoia, episode 130, I talk about how I was once sent on an assignment for CNN based on a New York Times story on why the Tennessee Tom Bigby waterway was considered a failed pork barrel project. Specifically, my boss ordered me to ask why no one was water skiing on the waterway, even though we were sent over there on a boat in the middle of December. Now, just as we're about to start our interview with the Army Corps guy, I warn him about the question I'm ordered to ask. Old Southern boy gives me a devilish look as he asks, "Can I be totally honest?" "Of course," I say. He warns I might not be able to use his answer, but okay, fine, let's just do this and we'll deal with it. So there we were in layers of clothing. I mean, a rubber rain suit, a trench coat, our teeth are chattering, and I figure, let's get this over with. "Sir," I ask, "why are there no water skiers out here on the Tenn-Tom today?" He looks me in the eye, he smiles, replies as he's shivering, "Because it's fucking cold out here." Well, the soundbite I used in the story is a little more family-friendly dodge to that question. Well, our last clip is from episode 131 with a very interesting guy. He's David Wilder. He's CEO of PR firm TrustPoint Exposure, which makes the audacious money-back guarantee of securing Tier 1 media placement and major AI dominance. What's the trick? David explained.
It's not about writing the 5,000, word articles anymore to see how many keywords we can stuff in, because AI wants the answer. And so it wants the answer first, then how did you get the answer, and references, and it checks. So what we've got to do is just approach it in a different way, and honestly in a more human way, and I really appreciate that, because it gets everybody's story out there the way that it should be told. And they've seen some massive upside to being on those search engines. It's incredible.
Well, that's our Tales from the Beat recap for 2025, our best year yet since I started the podcast about three and a half years ago. Now, to everyone who's viewed or listened to Tales, I thank you sincerely for your support, and I hope you'll spread the word, comment, subscribe. If you'd like to be a guest or suggest one, I can be reached directly at talesfromthebeatgarston@gmail.com. I am Ed Garsten, and I'll be back soon with more tales. Take care.